and I'm happy to have Sherri Jerzyk here. She is a longtime technician at Texas AMU and has been in the rehab field for many, many years, understanding the complications of working with vets, clients, and dogs, and keeping our communication channels open. So tonight she's going to discuss some of those important things. We also want to say thank you. It's storming horribly in Texas tonight, so we hope she makes it home. But understand that we're having a chat tonight because her computer is in one building and she is in another, being safe from tornadoes. So thank you for your time tonight, Sherri, and I appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I think we're at this turning point in vet med. We've reached a point, I think COVID pushed us to where they don't want to talk with clients anymore. You know, they feel like they don't really have to talk with clients. And clients are now willing to leave clinics if they're not getting their needs met. So I think we're at this weird tipping point that if they want to quit losing clients and keep clientele and stuff, they're gonna have to start communicating a little bit better. People aren't gonna deal with drop your dog off and see you in 2 hours anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting because there's still not a lot, but there's still a lot of people who they won't let them in the room or the building because they feel like the clients make the session so much longer and so much harder. And I'm not saying they should always be in the room, but they do need to be interactive with the therapists, like to understand what they're doing and what's going on. And I think that's a hard balance because, everybody's like, booked for, a half an hour of this and 45 minutes of that. And,
Right.
and even some of the initial exams now we're talking about on different practices, some are 90 minutes to 2 hours. And then there was one group that was discussing that they're, a 60-minute initial exam and the vet is only in there. The vet themselves is only in there for like, 15 minutes and then goes on to the next place. And that's not a lot of time to get everything because you don't even know enough about everything. So I think that's, and the vet's like, well, my technician takes all the information and tells me everything. But it's not the same as from hearing it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think quality of care is sacrificed when you don't have proper communication. I see that it's rolling over into client compliance. We're actually picking up a lot of new clients that have been going other places for long periods of time, solely because they don't feel like their needs are getting met. So yeah, I think we've got clients, students, and staff and technicians just all dropping like flies at this point in vet med. So I think the stress levels are really high, and I think that rolls over sometimes into quality of care. So.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, the course I'm at now has, I don't know, maybe 60% vets, but they all say if they had a choice to redo it, they wouldn't go to vet school. Isn't that scary? I mean, they're young. I mean, they're relatively young. To me, relatively young. They're in their, 30s, graduated with the last 10 years and doing what was supposed to be their dream job. And they're like, some of them say, hey, listen, I love the job, but I would never put myself through the school again. And others are just like, there's just not enough time to do what they want to do well. One of my kind of underlying goals a little bit has been like, if we can have a VTNE for a veterinary technician, why can't we have at least some sort of a standardized exam so that we know everybody graduating from different rehab programs has similar competencies?
Right.
Because I go to all the rehab programs and, taking them one by one, and they're all so different. So different.
Right.
And
I'm sure even the one I went to CRI back like when Lori McCauley and Amy Hesbaugh and Christine Zink taught us. I mean, we were like an outbuilding in a horse pasture when I went, and the class had like 10 people in it.
Yeah.
So you know, when you had like the pioneers, it definitely wasn't easy. It was very intense, and I know that is even evolved some. And unfortunately, there's a lot of clinics that don't want to spend the money to hire certified rehab techs. They want to, I know one facility that is using kennel people to run the underwater treadmill, and they're not even technicians. Because it's what they can do to, you know, make a little more money and not pay for a rehab technician. So,
That's a horrible situation, because I mean, everybody thinks the underwater treadmill is just a simple modality that you put the
yeah,
dog.
but you can't do any harm with it.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, that is one of my pet peeves when I walk in and see people not either in the treadmill or gating the dogs, or at least paying attention to the dogs.
Right,
They're like, oh,
right.
yeah, he's a good in the treadmill. I got 5 other things to do at the same time. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, yeah. Or seeing that post-op TPLO that's walking at 0.5 miles per hour for 15 minutes and has been for 6 weeks now. You're like, why is that dog walking at 0.5 miles per hour? So I get it.
No, it's a really hard situation, because even as a certified tech and a trained tech, it's hard to pay your bills doing it too.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, when you're talking about rehab techs, I don't think vet med looks at them the same way they look at some of the other technicians. I don't think a lot of people in the clinics understand what goes into being like a rehab technician. So they're like, oh, well, their job is really easy. They just run the underwater treadmill all day. So why should I pay them as much as I'm paying, my anesthesia technician?
Oh,
They just, yeah,
yeah, it's
they
just
just don't get it.
no,
So
that's an
I
issue.
think the communication problem is not just, I think it's internal as well as it is with clients. And one of my biggest pet peeves is clinics labeling clients as difficult clients.
Yeah,
And all clinics label, I've seen it every clinic I've ever worked at, that there are clients labeled as difficult clients. And not only do we label them as difficult clients, we tend to make sure we tell everybody in the clinic about this difficult client. And if that client's can go back to their regular vet or whatever, then you make sure you tell that vet clinic or whoever else they're going to, when you talk to them on the phone, what a difficult client this is. And I do agree that I think sometimes there are actual per se difficult clients, but I believe, and from working kind of the rehab field, that rehab also becomes the place that they send all the difficult clients, because maybe rehab can do something for them, and we'll just kind of shove them off because we don't want to have to deal with them. And you're laughing because you know it's true.
I do.
But and then you'll read the comments, like the internal comments and stuff in some of these cases, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, but something just isn't clicking. So when you communicate well with your clients and you interact with these clients, I found that out of all the difficult clients that have been dumped on me or sent my way, that actually only a very, very tiny percentage of those clients were actually difficult clients. Most of those clients, when you took 10 minutes to talk to that client and find out the whole backstory or what was going on, some of those clients, I'm like, I probably wouldn't have handled it as well as the client did. When you listen to their side of the story, then read the actual record, kind of what went down, I completely see why the client got mad. And then the minute the client gets mad, they're labeled difficult and nobody speaks to them anymore.
Well,
So,
yeah,
which is horrible. Absolutely horrible. The last thing you want to do is if you're trying to help the animal, is shut off the lines of communication and put the blinds on and say, that's it. They said something I don't agree with, so we're not going to talk to them anymore.
well, and I think asking the right leading questions too, because if you just let them, they start on their story, which is important, but then you kind of have to lead them to what you need to know also. And that, I don't think we're all taught how to do that in any situation.
Correct.
Whether it's with our own teams, or whether it's with our office staff or even our, family, we don't always ask the right questions.
And we don't listen well. So we all know that the story is going to be told differently from that client to a technician, from that client to the front desk staff, from that client to the doctor. Those stories are not always going to be the same. So what happens when we get upset is they tend to shut that client down and say, I'm not dealing with them anymore. Instead of telling that client, okay, maybe there's a piece of this puzzle that isn't clicking with me. So I'm going to go get Justin, because I think he'll be able to understand what you're saying a little bit better, so we can, give your patient the best care possible. We also have the stigma in vet med that it has to be administration or a doctor that talks to a client. I don't know why. They always think if there's a client that's upset, quick, get somebody from the office, business office, who most of the time knows nothing about vet med. They know the business aspect. Or we go, it has to be the doctor. So, and it's not always going to be the business office or the doctor that is the best person to talk to that client. It may be a technician, it may be an assistant. I mean, I don't know who it is, but there's somebody that's going to click with that client, that is going to have what it takes to listen to it and then translate it, so the line of communication doesn't shut down. Because the first thing what happens when they shut down that communication from the client, that doctor gets upset, is they either just say, okay, well, we're just gonna send this dog home with medicine and see what happens. And then they can go to their regular vet. If you're the emergency clinic, they can just go to their regular vet and figure it out. Or if it's the regular vet, they'll say, yeah, just come back in 2 weeks if that's not working. So we're letting our emotions of, I'm upset because this client is just, irritating me. I can't deal with them anymore. So instead of worrying about the best care for that pet, we're more worried about, let's just get that client out of here so I don't have to deal with them anymore. And so I think we need to start looking at removing ourselves from this situation if we're struggling with it, but making sure there's somebody that's going to be able to get through to them. Because, if we're really looking at what's in the best interest of that pet, writing a script and sending them out the door to follow up in 2 weeks with somebody is not going to be what's in the best interest of that pet. What if I do that and the dog actually has a serious problem, and I just got so frustrated with the client that I overlooked that. So if I can see that I'm getting through to this client, or that my emotions are getting high, it's time for me to step aside and say, there's somebody else that's probably better understanding what you're saying. Not throw blame back on the client, saying, oh gosh, I can't understand a thing you're telling me here, but just say, hey, something's not clicking with me, and I want to make sure I'm giving Buster the best care. So let me go get Jane. She's really good at this type of stuff, and I'm gonna let her get your side of the story, and then she can translate it how I would best understand it, and then we can move forward. And with rehab, it's really important. We can't just, if I have a client that's coming, some of my patients have been coming for 4 years, not because they're not getting better, because the owner still loves coming. But when we're talking like DM, where the dogs are going to be coming for 1.5 years or 2 years, or these senior pets with chronic problems that are coming for a couple of years, it's important that I have good communication with that client, because if I don't know the whole story of what's going on at home, it's going to affect the quality of care I give them. If I don't know what the struggles are for that client at home, it's going to affect the quality of care I give them. And I may be giving them inappropriate exercises if I'm not communicating well with them. And it's going to affect the longevity that patient has. It's also going to affect whether or not they stick with rehab. And right now, I'm seeing a lot of clients calling, wanting to transfer here. They've been going for rehab for other places for 6, 7, 8, 12 months. And when you ask them, hey, well, I see you're already going to a rehab facility. We're about the same distance. So, is there a reason that you're looking at switching? Or the majority of those clients, all but one, and I've talked to probably 5 or 6 in the past month, are looking to come someplace else because they don't understand what they're doing at the rehab facility. They're like, well, we've been going for like 7 months, and they've had us do shockwave, and they've had us do laser, and they've had us do exercises, and they had us do underwater treadmill, and I've spent thousands of dollars And I just keep going twice a week. And I was like, so what are you going for? Well, I'm not exactly sure. What did they use the shockwave for? I don't know. They didn't really tell me. All right. Well, what was your plan moving forward? And they're like, I don't know. They just told me I need to keep going. So if we're not giving them, if we're not communicating with them at that initial consult and saying, okay, what are your concerns? What are you seeing? Here's what we're seeing. What are our goals? What are our expectations? And it shouldn't be open-ended saying, all right, well, we're going to start with 20 rehab visits and we'll just see from there, because that doesn't really ring with a client. You have to look from the client's point of view. And if you're telling them 20 visits, they either hear 20 visits and my dog is fixed, or they hear 20 visits and then 20 more visits and then 20 more visits, because we didn't really give them any type of what we're looking for at 20 visits. And if we're not seeing that, where would we go from there? So maybe we say, okay, we're going to start with 20 visits because we need to work a little bit on strength and proprioception, because, Fluffy's, dipping in, explain the DM is going to progress. We're dipping down a little bit. We need to try to gain some strength. We're not going to make Fluffy better, but we need to work on proprioception and explain why, and say, your dog's a little bit, has some issues going on. So we're not expecting to see great results in a month. It's going to take a little bit of time. So let's give it 20 visits. We'll come twice a week and do 20 visits or 10 visits, or whatever you can do. And then we're going to see, is our proprioception the same? Is that getting better? Is that getting worse? Are we struggling more? You said we're having trouble with the step getting into the house. We're going to reassess and say, are we still having difficulty with that? Or is that getting better? We're going to see, are we staying the same? Are we declining? Do you think we're a little bit better? And then we're going to chat and say, okay, this is what we've accomplished, or we haven't accomplished that we wanted to. What do we need to switch up? And then what is our next step that we're going to go from there? But we need to give them, I know we're trying to say open-ended because we're not exactly sure how long some of these things are going to take. I'm a firm believer that you can't say, well, this was post-op TPLO, 6 weeks, you're out the door and you're perfect. Some dogs are going to be doing great at 4 weeks, and some dogs are still going to be struggling at 12 weeks. So making sure you have that baby step game plan, so they know this is what we're expecting, because we tell them, well, the goal is for your dog to walk after back surgery. Well, that goal's up here, the dog's here. So if we give them the goal, we want your dog to walk, and we're starting here with the dog not able to lift its head, they don't see any of this progress in between because we didn't give them any type of goal to shoot for.
So how often, and I'm hearing this a lot, is it that the client's expectations and goals aren't either matching with reality or matching what the therapy group is looking for? I feel like sometimes they're not always on the same page.
Right. So I think it's a little bit of both. So if the client comes in, I think it's important at that first visit to discuss what's going on with the dog, discuss expectations and goals of both of y'all. What would your expectations and goals be for your dog? Because if that dog was a dog that ran 5 miles a day with the owner, their expectation, 2 weeks in might be, well, I need him to be running two miles by next Wednesday. Okay, well, this is why that's not a realistic expectation. Because progress is going to be a little bit slower, so we can baby step it and break it down. You think your DM dog's going to run agility again. Then if that goal is unrealistic, then maybe they think their DM dog is going to run agility again because they've read something on the internet, like the old Clemens protocol, or read somewhere that chiropractic and acupuncture and PEMF mats and all this stuff there, and their dog will get better. Then maybe nobody has actually had that explanation, sat down and taken the time to explain with them exactly what it is they're looking at. And I've talked to a lot of DM owners, and I would say 99% of DM owners actually have no idea of what the disease is or what to expect from it, because it has not been explained to them by anybody before they've gotten to rehab. So I think their expectations were unrealistic because nobody had that explanation with them to tell them what they're doing. The majority of people I see, like that are coming for anything, I think there's a lag in communication that's given to the owner, and then they go to Dr. Google, and Dr. Google would give them,
Dr.
know,
Google, yeah.
the rainbow and unicorn version, or give them the death and destruction version, and they come in and the dog, had, a UAP, and they're thinking the dog's leg needs to be amputated because they read something online, as they're realizing now you just need some recovery time. So having that honest talk at the beginning, and I do think in some aspect, if you have a technician that excels at speaking with clients, I'm a firm believer that get the technician in there to sort all that stuff out and talk with them first. And I don't mean that being disrespectful to the veterinarians in any way. I'm just saying they're a little more black and white when you come to the doctors, and technicians tend to be a little more butterflies and rainbows and touchy-feely. And sometimes that's what it takes to kind of break that barrier and make sure that they're understanding what it is that that dog has before you begin, because I don't think there can be any realistic expectations if you don't understand what you're dealing with. And sometimes we'll see dogs that have been going to rehab or being treated for long periods of time. Like we've got one that's on the books for next week. She's been going to rehab for 7 months. She's had no diagnosis. The dog has not been worked up and has no diagnosis. She's spent about $6,000 in rehab.
Yeah.
When I said, I'm not exactly sure why you're coming, she goes, I don't know. I'm just been coming to rehab. Is your dog getting any better? Because the notes don't look like it is. No. He hadn't gotten any better. And said, has your dog seen an orthopedic, a neurologist, had x-rays, nope.
That's people putting money in their pocket, don't you think?
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I do think that. But I'm wondering, how can you recommend these treatments if you don't know what you're working with? So I think it's important, even with the shockwave. I mean, we have people that have been getting shockwave someplace else. We say, okay, so how did the shockwave work for you? And they're like, well, I'm not exactly sure what we were doing with it. I was like, did they not explain why you were getting the shockwave and what the goal was? Because I mean, we have the talk saying, okay, we're not expecting you to see anything with the first one. Oh, your dog's a severe tendonitis. We're not expecting anything with the first one. May or may not expect anything with the second one, but we give them very realistic goals of what we're expecting, because we need to communicate that with them. There are a lot of people that if a doctor tells them, well, your dog needs, 5 shock waves and 10 lasers and acupuncture and chiropractic and 10 sessions of underwater treadmill, they say, okay, if that's going to help my dog, that's what I want to do. They don't even have to know why they're doing it. That's always going to fail, because one, the client's never going to know when they're done. 2, if you're doing it like that, you're never going to finish the dog, obviously. But I don't think you're going to, how are you going to solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is? And how do you know what's working? If you're doing shockwave laser, chiropractic, acupuncture, land exercises, and underwater treadmill, all of those things every week, how do you know what is and isn't working for that patient?
Well, and how fast can tissue change, and how much can tissue take? I think that's.
Have you ever taken a discharge instruction from like a TPLO or a fracture repair or anything like that? Have you ever read a full discharge instruction from one of those? Do that. Get one from one of your orthopedic vets and read those. I would be confused. They're normally about 3 or 4 pages long, and they've got so much information that doesn't matter. Sometimes they have the wrong animal's name in it because they copied and pasted. And they didn't go back and change the name. But by the time you get to like the home instructions, you're already lost. And then half those instructions don't make sense. And then we don't prepare the clients before those surgeries even. We don't sit down and communicate with them and say, okay, your dog's having a TPLO. We explain what the TPLO surgery is and what it's repairing. But we don't say, okay, we're shaving your dog's entire leg. You know how many people are shocked that they can pick up their dog and it's not just the knee that has been shaved? I mean, traumatized, shocked that their dog's entire leg has been shaved. Your dog is not going to be able to be off leash for this period of time. Your dog is not gonna be able to do this. Your dog's not gonna be able to get out. Your dog, you live on the 3rd floor, your dog's probably not gonna be able to walk up 3 flights of stairs. We tell them that when they come to pick up their dog. So how are we expecting them to be prepared to take care of this dog properly when it gets home? If we did not tell them till they were on their way home what to be prepared for. And then we're shocked that the compliance is down. So the last clinic I was at in Tucson, which is actually where I met Joe, I talked to one of the surgeons, the head surgeons there, and explained that to him. As like, this is why your clients are failing, is you're not setting them up for success. And that is not the client's fault. That is our fault because we're not communicating properly. So we took an hour and we sat down and we wrote up a 1-page paper that when they booked a TPLO, it said, your dog will be coming for a TPLO. This is what's going to happen while your dog is here with us. These are the things you will need to be prepared at home. And this is what you can expect for your dog's recovery for at least the next 6 to 8 weeks. We rented them help them up harnesses for a week until they came back with suture removal if they felt like they couldn't handle it on. But they knew they needed someplace to keep the dog. We didn't even crate them anymore because we never, our problems decreased when we increased our communication. So we stopped in Tucson, we stopped locking up our post-op TPLOs for 6 weeks. We gave them restrictions, but none of them were caged anymore. And we had fewer dogs coming back with problems because the owners had guidelines and they kind of knew what to expect going in. They knew they needed a place to keep the dog that was this size. They knew the dog had to go out on a leash. They knew that they needed some type of traction on the floor. They knew they needed a sling. They knew the dog's leg was going to be shaved. They knew that there might be that there were going to be a lot of staples and they might see oozing and seeping and bruising. All of those things were told to them up front. So it wasn't the shock factor. They show up and their dog's bruised and swollen and bald and has 6 bottles of medicine and the dog's bouncing around the room. And we just gave them 3 pages of instructions. Go home and read this. And we wish you the best. And we'll see you in 2 weeks at suture removal.
Yeah, setting the expectation of what they have, what they're getting into is huge.
Correct. But we don't do that. But then we're upset that we don't have compliance. And then going with compliance, it's the same thing. And this is a true story. There was a dog that was having seizures and the owner brought the dog in. It wasn't at this clinic. They started the dog on seizure medication, sent the dog home. The guy came back through their emergency room. About a week later, dog still having seizures. Guy hadn't been giving the medication. They're like, well, that's why the dog's having seizures. Told him he needed to give the medication, sent him home. Came back again. This happened 3 times. At the 3rd time that they discussed, do we need to report this guy for, how he's taking care of this dog? Because this is cruel. This dog is seizuring and he's just literally non-compliant. I can't deal with him anymore. The doctor on the case said, I can't deal with him anymore. This is stupid. I just keep telling him the same thing. 4th time, the guy comes back. Same doctor got him. Flew off the handle, threatened the guy, told him, we need to get this dog away from you. You're a horrible owner. You can't take care of your dog. You just keep coming back, wasting my time. Dog comes back the 5th time for having seizures. Another doctor goes and sees him. Sits down and talks with the guy and says, I don't understand why you keep coming back if you're not going to give the dog the medication. Is there a reason that you're not giving your dog his medication? Just asked him. Guy breaks down crying and says, I had a head injury in Desert Storm, a traumatic brain injury, and my short-term memory is gone. He says, I don't remember if I give my dog his medication or not. I forget he has medicine. The doctor says, wow, I did not know that. What would help you remember to give your dog the medication? He goes, well, my doctor made a sheet for me that goes on my refrigerator that has my medication on there. And I have a box that my medicine's in, and then I just mark it each day when I take my medication. Doctor typed him up a simple spreadsheet like he had for him, gave it to him with another, I didn't know what he'd done with medication, with another prescription of medication. Guess what? dog seizures were regulated. That client though was told it was horrible, was threatened to take his dog away because he was abusing his dog. And everybody hated that guy because he was non-compliant, but nobody bothered to ask him why he wasn't able to give his dog his medication.
Asking the right questions is huge.
Right.
It's huge.
So we need to take the time to ask those questions. And it may be if they say, you know what, I just don't have the time to give the medication. That's a completely different thing. Maybe they say, I don't know, my husband, I thought he was giving it. Maybe you just need to like point blank say, you're responsible for the medication, but sometimes it's as simple as asking one question, why?
Yep.
And I can't imagine how bad that guy must have felt. Those 4 previous times he was at that clinic with doctors yelling at him, telling him how stupid and horrible of an owner he was. When
Not
he obviously.
Yeah, it's, I mean, but what word do we keep using over and over again a little bit is time, right?
But how much time, we're afraid to take 5 minutes to sit down and talk with a client. How much time did he spend with that dog doing the same? How much time would he have saved if he asked the guy the first time he came
Right.
back? Said, hey, why are you, is there a reason we're not giving the medication? Is the dog spitting the pill out? What's going on here? If he had asked, that would have saved 3 more office calls.
Yep.
So it would have saved money and time. And I do think that sometimes we're so afraid that we're going to lose 10 minutes if we sit down and talk to a client. But if I don't sit down and talk to my client, find out what's going on, make sure we're on the same page, how much time am I going to lose working that patient and doing extra stuff with that patient to try to get them where I need them to be because I didn't have the right information. So I think it's a misnomer that we are losing time if we talk to our clients.
Oh,
I think we're losing time by not.
no, totally. I just, as in the technician world, I just feel like when we're at in the midst of the day, we keep looking at our watch.
Yep.
Or a clock or whatever, and being like, the next patient's coming in the door, or this happened or that happened, and I'm behind. Right. And, whether it's an initial exam or whether it's a rehab session, people they would rather pay a little more money and have it done well. And I think we try to, make it a little bit like cheap and fast sometimes to get more people in the door.
Right. And I agree. I think it's a scheduling issue in a lot of these that we feel like I need to squeeze another client in the day to get the figures up.
Yes.
And if you are losing clients because you're doing that, you're not gaining anything by doing it. And also, are you providing the care that you want to provide for that patient?
Well,
so I think scheduling needs to line up with, I've got clients that should be done in about 35, 40 minutes. I book an hour when they come because I know that's realistically what it's going to take to make sure that dog gets what it needs and that I can answer the client's questions.
Yep.
So I get very, very honest with my clients. People are afraid to be brutally honest with their clients. We try to sugarcoat it. I'm not. I tell my clients, look, I'm going to tell you what I would do if it were my dog, because that's as honest as I could get with you. If your dog is at the end of life, we're going to sit down and talk about what the end of life looks like, what we can expect. And we're going to start planning end of life now, because you don't want to plan end of life in 6 months when the DM has progressed. We're not talking about it then. We're going to talk about it now, and we're going to have check-ins along the way, because I need that connection with that client, for one, to give proper care. But I also need that client to have realistic goals and expectations. And if I'm not the one that's holding them accountable to that, nobody else is going to do it, because nobody else is seeing them every day. The family's not going to hold them accountable. And people have a hard time holding themselves accountable in situations like that. So I want them to be prepared for that. We avoid talking about the end of life and those type things. I also tell my clients, because when you're doing rehab and you don't have help, you don't really get to take phone calls through the day. So I always tell my clients, hey, you know what? You're going to think of all those questions. I'm happy to answer any of the questions you want to talk about, but shoot me an email. I always check my emails several times throughout the day. And I will email you back or call you if I need to talk to you about it in person. guess what? That also cuts down on time because now I can copy and paste that email into the patient record and I don't have to type all of that in.
No.
So there's also that aspect of it. But when you start communicating with your clients, they start telling you the things that they normally don't tell people, sometimes personal, probably don't want to hear some of those. But they tell you the things that they're, they pay more attention to the dog because they know that you're listening to them. And then they also, they keep you better informed. And if you're better informed, you're better able to care for that pet as well. So, oh, I just saw him leaving. So I think that stuff is all completely irrelevant. And I hate when I see a technician trying to talk to a client and the doctor's trying to hurry them on. If most of the time when we're talking to a client, yeah, you might hear us talk about, hey, how was your vacation and stuff like that. If I look human to my client and I don't look like I'm trying to sell them something, they're going to be more receptive and they'll follow through. Their follow through at home is going to be much better. I'm not going to just say, well, your dog's got, a biceps tendon injury. You really should get shockwave. We're going to sit down and talk about what a biceps injury is. We're going to talk about how hard it is to recover from that, how this is probably going to be a long battle along the way. We're going to talk about, yeah, your vet probably does have laser. I love the laser, but the laser's not the best option for this, and this is why. We could do, they always ask, well, can acupuncture fix that? Well, here's what acupuncture can and cannot do. This is why that's not a good option for the biceps tendon tear. And I explained to them, not just why I'm not just trying to sell you the shockwave treatment. I'm trying to explain to you why this is the best option above the other things. Because if they know that I'm actually trying to do what's best for their pet, their compliance is going to be better.
The trust
Right.
is important. Now, yes, the client and the technician and the rehabber person is super important. Where does the vet and the diagnosis fit into the conversation?
So part of that's going to depend upon how it operates. So like sometimes you'll have a dog that's already been completely worked up and diagnosed and stuff before it comes to rehab. And then at the initial visit, you're just checking to confirm that the doctor's checking to confirm that that's the case and diagnose what the deficits are, like, weaknesses are and the strengths are, and, come up with, this is what it is we need to work on. We need to build muscle. We need to work on range of motion. We need to do this. So, and my personal opinion from what I have seen, is that from my perspective, it's very important to have a doctor that, understands what's going on with the patient, is making proper calls for treatment and follow through. The clients generally see the doctor as, this is the person that's going to know what's going on with my pet. So the doctor's going to diagnose my pet and know what's going on. A lot of times they think the doctor's going to be the one that fixes it until they start working with a technician. I think with a gap in communication, I think there's an internal gap in communication as well between the technicians and doctors. Not just in rehab, but in other areas. And that's several fold. One of that being that you could have an extremely qualified technician that the doctors don't have faith in for who knows what reason. We know there's 1,000 reasons. So they don't use that technician to their potential and let them shine and do what they're good at. We also, unfortunately, when you're working like we do in rehab, you spend a lot of time working cases and stuff on your own, doing treatments and stuff on your own. So sometimes when a case is turned over to you to do those things, when you're working that patient consistently, you pick up on little things. Say, I think that's abnormal. That's not how that was before. And then how many times have I gone to doctors and said, hey, I need you to look, and it may not just be the rehab doctor, it may be the surgeon, it may be the neurologist, and say, hey, I've been seeing Fluffy every week for about 8 weeks now. Something's not right today. The gait's a little bit abnormal. That's not the leg we had a problem on. And they write the technician off. They glance at the dog really quick, walking by and go, he looks the same to me. And you're like, I'm telling you, it's a little bit different. And then we document that. And then they come next time, looks a little bit worse. And then somewhere 3 or 4 visits down the road, the dog's having a problem. And the doctor's like, oh my gosh, look, this dog's now lame on the other leg. I told you that
Yeah.
3 months ago.
The
Um,
communication gap and trust.
right.
The belief and trust that you're knowledgeable. You're the one with the hands on the dog so many times, so much, you know?
Right. So I think it's them like listening to each other. So I need to listen to the doctor when he says, hey, you know, this dog also has this and this and this. You probably need to be careful of this. I kind of pick up a click in this, but the doctors also need to be receptive when not just a rehab technician, but when any technician is picking up, and they're a good technician, is picking up on something that seems abnormal and stuff, you know, take heart to that and honestly, you know, check that out. It might be much easier to address now than it is down the road. And I'm not saying that the doctor is not qualified. I'm saying I've had my hands on this dog a lot lately, and this is not how this dog has been. That something is different. So I think it's a vortex of a lot of people not talking to each other appropriately and communicating well, talking and passing, doctors, technicians. If we're not all communicating, the patient care is going to be compromised. But if we're not talking with the clients properly, the patient care is going to be compromised. And I think communication, from what I see on the backside, is kind of at an all-time low, unfortunately. I just don't think we're communicating well in our clinics with each other. And I don't think we're communicating as well as we should be with our clients. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of patients that seem to be coming a lot more than they should. And I think we're picking up things that maybe we should have picked up a little bit earlier in some cases, because the talks just weren't happening like they should be happening.
And do you agree it's not just, I mean, it is the verbal and one-on-one communication, but it's also, you know, that the documents they get are simple enough that they understand, and that things are shown to them on video and in writing and everything, so that there are multiple ways to understand the same thing. Does that, you know, because some people might understand what they read, some people might understand what you tell them, and some people might need to actually like visualize it on a video, you know?
Right. And I have clients that when you send them those videos, they still can't visualize it. They say, my dog can't do that. So I'll take a video back here of their dog doing that. And then it clicks with them because they saw their dog do it. So I don't ever say, it's easy to look at exercises and say, okay, I need strength, I need proprioception, I need this. Wow, I've got all these exercises I can send home with the owner. That does no good if the owner can't do those exercises. So I talk to the owners and say, okay, I need you to be honest with me because I'm not the judge and jury. I need you to, one, tell me if you have any physical restrictions that I need to be taking into account. Two, if there's kids in the house, I'm always going to give the kid an exercise or two to do with that dog, because I think it's important to, I think the kids hold the adults accountable, but it teaches the kids responsibility with their patient, their pet. And I always tell the owners, I need you to tell me how much time you can honestly give a day to work with your dog. I don't know why so many clinics think that people should be working 20, 25 minutes a day at home with their dog. What if the owner, because here's the thing, if that owner has 5 minutes a day, they don't know which exercises are most important. They don't cut it back to 5 minutes a day. They cut it back to 0 minutes a day, all or nothing. So, all right, if you can give me 2 minutes a day, twice a day, that's fine. Let's start with 2 minutes a day, twice a day. I can work with that as long as you give me your goals and guidelines and we're working on the same page. That's a baseline to build on. And then again, the videos, the pictures, I don't ask clients when they come back. I don't say, how are the exercises going for you? Because what's the answer going to be every time?
Every time it's good.
It's good.
Or
And
I
then,
just haven't had time. It's one or the other.
right. So I don't say, hey, how are the exercises going at home? I say, what exercises are going okay for you and what exercises are you struggling with? Because if they can't name any of the exercises, they're not doing any of them. If they can rattle off and say, oh, hey, we're doing the figure eights, we're doing the inclines, we're doing this, but I'm really having trouble with the sit to stands, then I know they're working with the patient. And that also then gives me something to build on. Simple questions. You don't have to have big prime questions, but if you ask questions that will give you the answers you're looking for, you're gonna cut down on how much time you're spending doing those things. So you're not losing time by communicating. If you're communicating with your staff, you're gonna hopefully bring down the stress levels in work and bring that and cut down on some. The problem with getting the stress levels high at work is that mistakes are made. Whether they're made in charges, whether they're made in documents, whether they're made in medication. I mean, it's a well-known fact, even in human medicine, that when you have those struggles and stuff going on, and you have distressed people doing that, mistakes are going to be made. So it's not that we're losing time by communicating and having these talks and saying, hey, you know, me and you may have butted heads, but let's wipe the slate clean. I respect you, you know, as a technician. Let's get this, you know, moving forward. You're going to gain a lot more time and a lot more patient and client compliance. Probably get better. If you're not having to rebattle these same clients over and over and over, you're going to fit more patients in too. So I don't think you're losing anything when you focus on taking that time to communicate with your staff, taking that time to communicate with your clients, giving your staff time to communicate with those clients. I think you're gaining all the way around. You're gaining. You're not going to be losing anything. And I think we need to look at that differently.
I agree. I think that's a great conversation, and I think we don't take our own time and energy to put the pieces together, and there's more than one piece in the whole rehab program. We call it a multimodal program, but I think maybe we just need to add that to part of it. Communication is part of it, and it's communication to the client, to the doctor, to your team, and to the dogs, right? Keeping them happy. And
Yeah, absolutely.
so, no, I super appreciate that and your time. And I'm just gonna say thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was fun just chatting with you again.
Yeah,
Always very informative. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
be safe. Thank you.
Bye-bye. I'll see if I get home. Bye.
Bye.